The average large enterprise has 24 million vulnerabilities. The good news is only 5% will probably be exploited. But which 5%? That's where Kenna comes in. Kenna Security's modern vulnerability management technology combines real-time threat intelligence, data science, and automated risk analysis to prioritize the vulnerabilities that pose the biggest threat to your organization. Team up with Kenna Security and make the most of your limited resources. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Kenna Security. Hackers attack systems that are not patched. You need protection, but virtual patching isn't working. That's why you go patchless. Topia analyzes, prioritizes, and remediates vulnerabilities before they're exploited. Even the 0 days, all from one interface. Security gets better memory defense to complement endpoint strategy while improving overall vulnerability management and compliance. Adopt a hacker's mindset, eliminate vulnerability. Get your 30-day free trial at securityweekly.com/vicarious. FlexTrack is the platform that helps cybersecurity practitioners get the daily work done. Red teams can create reports in half the time and track risk to resolution with the blue team. Teams can centralize remediation efforts across all scans, assessments, and audits. Effectively communicate risk in real time through simple visualizations, scanner and ticketing integrations, and robust analytics. FlexTrack is perfect for collaboration across all teams. Visit securityweekly.com/FlexTrack to claim your free month. Welcome back, everyone, to Paul's Security Weekly. Would you like to have all of your favorite Security Weekly content at your fingertips, learn about upcoming webcasts and technical training, or just wish you could hang out with Security Weekly crew and community? You can do all those things at securityweekly.com/subscribe. Sign up for our mailing list, join the community Discord server, and subscribe to all of our shows on the Security Weekly network at securityweekly.com/subscribe. Upcoming webcast and technical trainings include why you should learn why you should stop trying to discover and classify data, and how to thwart hackers using deception, and how to build a risk-based vulnerability management system. Wow, that was a whole bunch of stuff. In any case, you can go to securityweekly.com/webcasts for 3 upcoming webcasts or /on demand if you missed any of the previous ones. And with that, that will conclude this episode. Oh, no, wait. I'm reading too far ahead because Burgundy reads whatever's on the teleprompter. And I'm trying to...
Okay,
what was
Paul. On to the news now.
What was the virtual hacker summer camp short link? I thought it was it Black Hat 2020? I'm trying to relate this to a story that I had tried that.
Is there actually going to be a summer camp?
You got a 404. There was a talk, and we'll get...
Joff can help you with the 404s.
He can. He's awesome at that, I heard. So...
Go ogle it.
Go ogle it. VHSC? Because there was a talk about JavaScript in the browser. No, yeah, I mean, that's a thing. Like, where are all of our interviews? That was a thing. In any case, in Security Weekly Virtual Hacker Summer Camp, I interviewed a security researcher that was looking at JavaScript security vulnerabilities in the Taman Park. Was that it? Security holes and attack vectors in JavaScript presented at Black Hat 2020 this year. And what was interesting about that is that it comes full circle today. Is this week on Enterprise Security Weekly, Kevin O'Brien from Great Horn described an attack where this was a serious phishing attack. And serious, I mean, the amount of effort they put into it was amazing. And also they got legit email accounts to send from. But that wasn't the most interesting part. They found open redirects in the form of vulnerabilities from late last year on big websites like Sony and others. Use those as the links inside of the email campaigns that was targeted at C-level executives at international large companies. And then that link through the redirect, which because it's Sony looked legit, took you to like Amazon hosted infrastructure. So that looked legit. That was a phish kit that took you to the login page for your Active Directory or Microsoft 365, which was a fake page. But even if you didn't enter your credentials, inside that page were exploits for what I believe are JavaScript vulnerabilities inside of Chrome, which when you read the headlines this week is like, oh, new Chrome 0 days that have been fixed. But there's an entire backstory where I think it was U.S. government officials said it was Iran. And then Kevin was pretty quick to point out that it was not Iran, that he believes it was Russia, based on his analysis of the groups. Tyler, you and I were talking about this on the break. I don't know, did I get the story right? And is this confirming all of my suspicions of how this plays together? Because my guess is maybe the attackers saw some of that research at Black Hat. Maybe they already knew, but I just find it ironic that that was just presented at Black Hat. And I believe Taman Park had a GitHub where he replicated some of his tools.
Yeah, there was definitely some tool grabbing, and these are not uncommon tactics, and this is some stuff that is chaining together, how good red teams do phishing.
Yep.
But they did the part where the Chrome and some of the 0 days, like at very specific targets from an executive level, like there was that they were after a specific person or a specific set of creds or access to a specific thing. In order to burn a 0 day like that, that was my question. That's a big deal.
Was the juice worth the squeeze? And what exactly was the squeeze? Was it just to get these high-level accounts to profit, which was kind of the general consensus? But your theory, Tyler, is that it was going after specific targets. It wasn't just random C-level executives.
Yeah.
That in there was a specific target that was worth all of that effort, including your burn 0 days for this attack. They're now fixed.
Yeah. And that's a tactic that we use in red teaming, right? Like we often don't burn 0 days because it's just not something that is part of, worth the monetary effort of what a red team is. But
right.
As you're targeting, in order to kind of disperse who your real targets are, you pad that kind of target list and make sure that you're hitting the people that are within inside of a certain group or department. But usually you're after one or two people within inside of that. And I would venture to guess that there's a specific piece of information within inside of either someone's email or they had single sign-on to a specific application or service in which they're going to or were trying to leverage, in which they targeted a very specific group of executives. Mm. Again, pure hypothesis.
Right, pure hypothesis.
Of course it is.
That's really interesting. Because it didn't really. It could have been a monetary grab, right?
But it could be. It could be industrial espionage. It could be just like nation-state espionage, where somebody says, "We know these 16 people have access to this. We really want it, so let's go ahead and hit 64 people, and hope we get one of the 16 out of that big group, and that way nobody picks up on exactly what we're after because the commonality between them all is nothing."
It makes more sense. They learned from Stuxnet that. One, if you're going to burn 0 days, it's likely for some nation-state interest.
Yeah, and it should be.
And it's not just 0 days, right? Like it's Chrome 0 days. That's
immensely valuable, and you're going to burn it on this.
But it's also like really trusted domains with open redirects they burn too. So it really wasn't even just that. Like those are valuable
assets. Multi-level burn of assets. So somebody had to really, really, really think this would work and to want it to work really bad. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine. You'd have to get high-level authorization to do that if you're working for a nation-state red team.
Mm.
It's that, or honestly, like literally someone was like, I've got this, I need to do something with it. Like this looks like a good target. Let's just do it.
Well, yeah, it could be that.
That's the only other logical explanation.
If they thought it was about to get burned anyway, it's like, well, okay, we're about to lose these 0 days as it is. We might as well go ahead and do something fun with them. So.
It didn't sound like. No, it didn't sound like that.
I agree, but I'm just different hypotheses that might be.
If you listen to Kevin's account, like it you wouldn't necessarily think that, right? Because he's kind of like there's lots of players involved, right? You go to Amazon, you're hosting all this C2 infrastructure basically in fish kits.
That's how you do it, right? Like like cloud fronting and subdomain hijacking, like that's how it's done right. And you use all the CDNs. There's more than Cloudflare out there. There's a lot of CDNs, and there's a lot of companies that do CDNs themselves. And so leveraging infrastructure that calls back to CDNs that has infrastructure that's shared on like a shared platform like AWS, like that's how you blend in. That's how you actually get callbacks to work. That's how you evade, next gen firewalls and layer 7. Like it's good tradecraft is what it is. And that's where we're having to get to as we're doing operations. So it's not surprising to see this. It's kind of surprising to see them
the scale
burn so much tradecraft on a single incident. But
Kevin also looked at this and said it was one of the largest phishing attacks he's ever seen.
Yeah.
And this is, he started his email security company about 5 years ago. So not only did they like burn all this stuff, but they burned it in like this grand fashion where they sent out tens of millions. Was it tens of millions of emails or something?
Millions,
tens of millions of emails. Like that's going to get someone's attention. Mm-hmm. Either they messed up or they knew what they were doing and wanted to get something fast.
You can't discount the fact that someone can mess up too, like especially with a phishing campaign. Like attackers make mistakes too, and no matter how careful you are and how good your tradecraft is, like you will always make a mistake somewhere. Like
that's the one where the new intern goes, "What does this button do?" And
no, I just got to chime in on what Tyler said. I mean, it is so true. Like we spend a lot of time very, very carefully preparing phishing campaigns, and inevitably there's an error in there somewhere. Also want to double down on what Tyler said about the CDNs. Oh, my God. We all do it to get good tradecraft. Pushing your C2 traffic through a CDN is definitely the way to go. There's no doubt.
Because you get a reputable domain to call back to, basically.
Yep.
Yeah. Speaking of reputable domains, PornHub apparently is a reputable domain. So my friends tell me for viewing pornographic material, which was now blocked in Thailand. I thought this was funny. So
VPN sales went through the roof. I should have bought some VPN stock. I wish I would have known.
What was pretty funny was a few dozen people reportedly protested outside Thailand's digital ministry holding signs calling for the return of PornHub. I just want to point out how hilarious that is.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, watch how many people are protesting here if somebody blocks Pornhub. So,
I'm guessing they had no trouble with people masking up for that portrait.
Right? But I mean, it's like we said with the like we all know from back in the day that just blocking sites is not. It's not how you accomplish.
It's not going to
security controls.
No, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
But you go to some government minister. I mean, we've seen this kind of stuff all through history. You go to some government minister. You bring the concerned fill-in name of some group here. Go to some government minister. They go, "Oh, this is outrageous. This shouldn't be going on." And they go in and make it their personal mission, and they get it passed.
Lots of people that vote for me are going to care about this.
It was like Tipper Gore getting labels put on rap albums. She was obsessed with these labels being put on rap albums to save the children from the horrors of rap music. Because if somebody hears,
I would be curious.
Go ahead.
I would be curious to see like what the political explanation was. Like if porn, for one, like we know that's not like going to get blocked either way. So is it a legitimate issue in Thailand because of things like sex trafficking and child pornography prolific in that region specific to PornHub, or is it actually an illegitimate concern around just someone's agenda? Like I'm really curious as to why someone picked this up for Thailand of all places and it hasn't been picked up anywhere else like the US, right? Like we have all talked about moving platforms and taking up something that is not so restrictive, such as PornHub, to post content. But is there content on there that maybe we don't know about that there is a political issue for?
According to Thailand's cybercrime laws, internet pornography as well as internet gambling are actually illegal, which is why the country recently blocked some 190 websites inside the nation's borders. As it turns out, Thailand loves its internet pornography, as the nation spent more time on PornHub than most, consistently ranking among the top 20 nations using the site.
Which just goes to show, if you try to take something away from people, if you try to take something away from people, they're going to go after it more.
And of course, the cynical view of this is that some government official owns the company PornHub.com and doesn't want people going to a competitor, so they enforce the law.
Yeah, that happens too.
Yeah,
But they blocked 190 porn
but not
sites.
his.
I guess there's probably more than 190 porn sites out there.
Well, as of this afternoon, no.
What's the current count? Anyone know?
On my porn meter here.
Right. Someone should measure that. So someone emptied out a $1 billion Bitcoin wallet. What does that mean? They emptied. They how did they cash it out?
sell
Or
it?
They sell
They
it.
transferred the
Transferred
bitcoins
it.
to another account.
Moved it
They
to another
transferred the
account?
money out. No, so if I'm not mistaken, and I haven't finished fully investigating like all of the angles, and like good information on this is hard to come by right now, but it looks like they've actually pulled it from the market, which has a whole nother implication on Bitcoin and like what resources and Bitcoin's available to the blockchain at this point in time, right? So that's kind of one of the big pieces of this is if it was pulled out and it just hasn't been re-added to the blockchain, like where did it go? How did they cash it out to a different currency, to monetary, like actual hard cash? Like this is a little bit harder logistically to do than simply just cashing out a Bitcoin wallet. And what's the implications on like the total value on the blockchain now with that missing? So there's a whole bunch of pieces to this that are just super fascinating.
Yeah. And why did
there's
they
a bunch of implications
$1.38
around Silk
behind?
Roads too. I'm telling you, there's a breadcrumb there that has some significance. Like from like I'm looking at Silk Roads, I'm looking at a bunch of old forums. We're looking at some dark like forums around like what the $1.38 means. There's got to be a meaning to how they did that or how they cashed that out.
Right. I wasn't sure if it was a fingerprint or a digital equivalent of giving him the middle finger.
Yeah. So they left just $1.38 US dollars in the Bitcoin account, and we can watch it because we don't know who, but we know the cryptographic hash of that account.
So I mean, the interesting thing is here that just like a fiat currency, the ultimate value of a cryptocurrency is zero. So it's all perceived value, right? So maybe they're cashing out because they think the perceived value has reached its theoretical maximum. They're like, that's it, I'm out. But there's probably more to it than that, I'm guessing.
I think there's also some conjecture around seizures of particular domains and or the forensic and or closing of cases such as like Silk Roads, right? Like, did someone find a crypto hash with inside of some of that forensics value and like the time limitation or time statutes like come up? Or did they find a way to finally cash it out? Or is there another partner with inside Silk Roads? Like, there's a whole bunch of things here that just like someone's got to figure this out because it's going to drive the rest of us crazy. If we don't.
Right? Someone found the password basically to the Bitcoin wallet, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Or it's going to become
It also felt like somebody was daring them to find it.
Or it's going to be the
was that
DB
too.
Cooper of like the modern age, and no one will ever know what happened to it.
Right.
Which will suck.
Yeah, but that's like the DB Cooper thing, So.
Exactly.
Oh, it's kind of like my story that I thought was going to be really awesome, but my story number 4, a nameless hiker in the case of the internet can't crack. And like I read through this whole article where someone who worked in technology decided they were going to leave all technology behind and hike the Appalachian Trail from the Northeast all the way down to Florida. And in Florida, they found the person's dead body. And the story recounts other stories from people who encountered this person, and they referenced him by a certain. So the story was good, but the thing is, they never found. Oh, so his only handle, for lack of a better term, he went by was mostly harmless, is what they called him. He was just a nice person. People talked with them. They sat around the campfire. And chatted with this person, helped him out, that kind of thing, and everyone recounts him as being like a really cool dude. And then just they couldn't determine cause of death, and they couldn't find any family, and all genetics companies have taken on this case, and they did a GoFundMe to do the genetic analysis, and they just still haven't been able to find out who this person is, which is really astonishing in today's day and age.
Yeah, even though it used to be common, it's just a very common thing.
Right.
It's like,
I mean, there's pictures of them all across social media, the whole thing, and no one knows who this person is, or doesn't want to say. Isn't that crazy?
That's really hard to do. Like, I don't think people realize how hard that is to do now.
Right. Did this person kill all of his family members and everyone that he knew and that went on his hike? Like, that's kind of what it,
It's like nobody's ever going to know who I am.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it could be somebody that like nobody in his family's seen for years and years and years, and he looks different. It's like they find some homeless guy on the streets, and nobody recognizes him because they haven't seen him since he was 23 years old, and he's been living in a cabin or something. And I don't know. It's a strange case, and you'd think, but I mean, if somebody just sort of been out there, I mean, I've actually known people that nobody would have recognized them.
It's a really interesting read. I think for all of us too in cybersecurity, just kind of astonishing that no one's been able to put the pieces together. Kind of like when we do investigations on some. Tyler, to your point about the Bitcoin wallet, right? Sometimes we do investigations and we don't have an answer.
And I mean, maybe just nobody has the resources to invest in actually really digging deep on those kind of cases because it's like there's no evidence of foul play.
Right. Yes.
And I mean, it's like you have to prioritize, just like threats. You have to prioritize what cases you're going to take because you say, well, I'm not going to investigate this murder because we're going to be spending all our time, trying to chase down some strange guy they found on the side of the Appalachian Trail. So.
Who's already dead. Who
it doesn't look like somebody killed him, so there's not like a lunatic running around. Maybe the person just, OD'd or fell over. And
that was, some of the comments were like, you know what? Why don't you just let him rest in peace?
Well, I mean, it's like right? That's the way he obviously wanted it. So bury him beside the trail and move on, and don't go disturbing, whatever. And
I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the recent laws that were passed as part of the election. I don't want to talk about anything else with the election in true Security Weekly spirit and staying out of politics, but I do want to talk about legislation that has been passed in various states that is related and directly related, actually, to cybersecurity and hacking. Massachusetts voters passed a right to repair measure, giving them unprecedented access to their car data, which I think is a good thing.
Yeah.
Amends and broadens a law that gives consumers in Massachusetts the right to repair the vehicles they own. It will require automakers that sell vehicles with telematics systems in Massachusetts to equip them with standardized open data platform beginning with the model year 2022.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, so I guess that's going to end up being like the old emissions stuff that they used to have, like the California emission standards meant they had to set vehicles up different ways to sell in California. So they may have to say, well, of course, they may do it in a negative way, too, and go, well, you don't get our super cool system because you get this ratty open source system we have to put on there instead.
So it gives them, it's a standardized open data platform to give vehicle owners and repair facilities access and the ability to retrieve mechanical data and run diagnostics through a mobile-based application. Eliminating I've got this old thing and it's protected with copyright laws, and therefore I violate copyright laws if I write software to bypass it. Right. Actually, a great example of that, Kevin Finisterre came on the show and talked about video games and how a lot of that software was protected under some of those copyright laws. Falling outside of this right to repair, it sounds like vehicles now in Massachusetts, at least, these standards are open so you can always repair and basically hack into your stuff to do diagnostics.
My car doesn't require you to have a phone app to manage it, but if you don't, there isn't any other way around that. You have to use their app. So if you want to use those features, that's a good thing, though.
It is.
There was a lot of issue kind of around that where there's other states that have went the exact opposite way, where you're breaking the warranty and the manufacturers are calling that. So there was all the chipping companies that have the performance diesel things or tuning capabilities. Like I spent a lot of time working with a company that did a lot of the tuning locally, and we had to brute force basically the ECU to find collision attacks in order to get around the encryption that these manufacturers are putting in around just the ECU, just to have visibility on that ECU, much less than find the collisions to tune those particular pieces of code or memory in space. That's a whole nother issue. So there's a lot of work and effort that went into that, and so I think this
some of it gets so bad, Tyler, that someone told me Hyundai, Korean company, and they were like, there's this one dude. in Korea, and we think he stole the ECU programming like device from the factory, or somehow like stole enough of it to be able to replicate it. And basically, you send your ECU to that person, or send them the software, and they'll send you back, updated ECU information, because it like basically
usually that's an inside job.
Yeah,
they work at the factory.
And
they reprogram the unlock.
Yeah, exactly. So you had to
I used to have a piece of equipment and had something similar. Was that it had nothing to do with a car, but it was like you could take the ECU out of that device and you could ship it to Eastern Europe.
Yep.
Where it would come back, and now you had access to all the features of the device.
Yes, they unlocked it. It's like an iPhone
it was
unlock,
basically it was basically jailbreaking it, because it was crippled, and there were all these features you had to pay for in stages, and you'd pay this person, and they would send it back, and it's like that. So. But then, if good luck, if I was reading people writing about it and go, oh, yeah, it didn't work, it crashed it, and now what I'm supposed to do? And, it's like, yeah, well, you're just out of luck.
And I mean, that varies by manufacturer, too. Some of my friends told me that Audi is very open, and they let you, reprogram your ECU, and it's like, whatever, that's really easy and open. And I think, it can kind of go two ways from their business perspective. I think much like Apple and Google, they want to obsolete their old devices so that you buy new ones to increase their profits. I think when you look at a company like Audi, for example, they want you to be loyal to their brand and buy Audi. And if you keep the same one, that's okay.
Yeah.
So there's two different schools of thought. I think Google, this is just my theory, with the Pixel 4, they introduced a bug where facial recognition would stop working and you had to enter your PIN code. Then also, and it was like a timing thing, not so much a race condition, where when you experience that bug, also every time you go to call, the screen would just go black and not come back. And if you rebooted your phone, Face ID would work and you would receive calls as normal for like a certain period of time, and then it would go black, and then facial recognition not work. And then in that time period,
it was an Android.
It was an Android bug.
Particular hardware
Correct.
Integrated with Android
11, right? And
yep.
If Tyler, you're Android, right? If you look for what the latest and greatest Android phone is, you're kind of in a bind right now, because before the Pixel 5 came out, what would you do? So, all right, you go OnePlus. Well, OnePlus just released the 8T. They're not ready.
Razer.
You go Razer or you go Samsung, which I don't like the crapware.
Samsung UI sucks.
Yeah, Samsung comes with so much crapware.
It does. It's too much of a proprietary platform. Xiaomi, their website was really confusing, and I was like, I don't know. I don't know if you Xiaomi.
That's why the Razer 2 went from $499 on Amazon to sold out and not findable for less than like $800.
So what's interesting is I got a Pixel 5, no more Face ID.
Huh.
It's you're back to fingerprint reader. And I tell you what, after about a week, I kind of...
Do you know why that is?
Yeah, because you wear a mask, and it can't identify you in the mask. And so they gave up on Face ID. That's the best I can tell.
The libraries they were using, there was some serious vulnerabilities inside the libraries that a lot of people were reporting on.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. But I actually, now, I kind of like the fingerprint reader. Yeah, I think it's more. I think it's more natural.
It's funny that the Apple did the same thing on the Apple SE.
Yep. No more Face ID, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And some people just don't like it. They don't like the idea of Face ID and all this stuff. So
it's because it's so easily breakable.
Yeah.
It is literally not hard.
But I think it's interesting where OnePlus is going to go next, because they're due in 6 months or so, right, to come out with a OnePlus 9.
I feel bad for the hardware engineers and the software engineers over there, because I imagine the pressure to get something done and done in a way that like meets all the demands right now.
Mm-hmm.
That would suck.
Yep.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Talk about crazy
look,
pressure.
I have to admit, I'm actually a fan of OnePlus. I've got a OnePlus 7 right now, but I may wait to the 9 and see what it's like. But I honestly believe that as a neutral Android platform, that's a relatively good choice.
Yeah, gotcha. Well, I mean, if you don't like it, I got a Pixel 5 that might be for sale when the OnePlus 9 comes out.
I got a nice Razer 2 for premium.
Yeah, and look, Pix 5 is not a bad phone. I like it. I mean, it's a smaller form factor, and I was kind of like, I'm old. I like bigger.
That though.
But then I like put it in my pocket, and I was like, oh, that's so much better than stuff in
hold it with one
the
hand
Pixel 4
again?
XL is like a mini tablet basically, and so yeah. It's only temporary till I buy the next phone that comes out. I have a problem.
Yeah, like 6 weeks later, right?
Yeah, I have issues with phones.
So there's a Kickstarter online that I've really wanted to test out, and I'm hoping they actually keep going. There's a simple phone that's like OLED.
Yeah,
it has the ability with like one app, and the screen, like there's nothing smart. It's like a flip phone that like nothing smart and just does phone calls. Like I would be really interested to see how nice that would be. Yeah, make a phone call, text some people, and then I use my laptop when I actually need like information. Like I wonder what the productivity and like distraction ratio would change to. It is very convenient to have a phone, and from a business standpoint, like you have a lot of apps and stuff at your fingertips. But that also, I was listening to Seth Godin on one of the podcasts recently. I think it was School of Greatness with Lewis Howes, and Seth, who is very highly connected, he's written 1 million books. He's like, business entrepreneur, very guru, the whole 9 yards. And one of the things that I was really fascinated by is the fact that he has no social media. He doesn't do any social media himself personally. And he's like highly, like his whole business line is on marketing and connecting people and getting business buy-in and, tribe and teams, all the stuff that is crucial to business. And yet he said, I have to give up something, and the cost of me having social media or learning how to do social media well is a cost that I couldn't reconcile based on what I cared about. And that was writing blogs and giving books and doing things for people. So it's an interesting like thought process I'm starting to go down. Like, what am I giving up just to have and know all of these particular technologies and platforms, which from an offensive standpoint, we have to know to a certain extent. But what am I giving up from a creative and like long-term standpoint? There's a lot to kind of digest.
Well, I was thinking about that the other day because I was thinking, what do you actually get from social media? I mean, obviously there's things for promotion or whatever, but as far as just individuals go, what do you really get out of it? I mean, how much time do you put into it or whatever? And I find it extremely distracting.
I do too, because I think the thinking was, and this is certainly true, but I think it's a slightly different use case from your everyday. I've got my phone, I want to check social media. I think the thinking was that's how you'd get some of your news. And if I try and use it that way today in 2020, there's huge issues with that on multiple fronts. Like, it's terrible.
That's how you get your fake news,
right? There's fake news and just the news that you would get is awful. So I've switched to Flipboard for getting my news. What's interesting about that is you get a lot of the mainstream news whether you like it or not, and so
which
I
also
get
sucks.
Which I get Vice and I get The Atlantic and I get USA Today and CNN. And it's amazing how slanted towards one political party all of those are. I'm not subscribed to any of those. I'm subscribed to like Python programming and hacking and information security and computer gaming and computer nerd. I'm subscribed to basically nerd stuff, some smoking barbecue, audiophile, headphone stuff, right? People know largely what I talk about on the show, what I would probably subscribe to. I'm subscribed to all that stuff. Nothing about mainstream media. Yet I see largely one-sided political view mainstream media inside of Flipboard. And what does that tell you? So like I can flip past it, but it's super annoying. Like I really just want to read my tech news.
Easy it is. It shows you how easy it is for these actors and why there was such a huge effort around disinformation campaigns, especially for the elections. From just a technical standpoint, like in order to hack the elections, it is a decent undertaking, and there's a lot of safe checks and a lot of backstops and abilities there. So the less effort was literally to manipulate. Like you can see how people's views will taint one way or another just based on the information provided to them, whether they want to get that information or not.
And it's a path of least resistance.
It's a crazy thing.
I mean, it's the path of least resistance. I saw some people posting stuff today. It was the most ridiculous, obviously fake stuff.
Oh.
And they were just all upset and outraged by it. I'm like, did it make you happy to read that? I mean, like, I when I first started using Facebook, the only reason we were using it was to just put pictures so we could share them with my parents of our daughter and whatever. And I just get more and more disenfranchised from those platforms all the time because I feel like I don't really get
like,
anything
Doug?
out of it.
I like and I'll call them out, Feedly. Because we curate our own news feeds in Feedly.
Yeah.
And I can go there and read 98%, right, the security news.
I just wait and watch the news at 6 p.m. like it was meant to be.
Oh, boy.
And Walter Cronkite
You pick up
comes
a
on.
newspaper or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, they come out like
That's the
once
way
a
it
day.
was.
Yeah, and that's the way it was.
It kind of ties into this article that I had about what Mark Cuban thinks that, well, in the article title's, sensational, the first trillionaire and the number one skill they should have, blah, blah, blah. We talk a lot about AI, machine learning, and those kind of techniques applied to information security today. What's interesting, I think, is Mark Cuban's quote, which says, if you don't know AI in the business world, you're the equivalent of somebody in 1999 saying, oh, I'm sure this internet thing will be okay, but, I don't really give a shit. And he says, if you want to be relevant in business today, you have to, or you'll be a dinosaur quickly, adopt AI technologies. There's going to be the AI haves and have-nots. If you're a have-not, you might as well rip out all the computers in your office and throw away your phones. That's how impactful it's going to be. I have to say,
bullshit.
But I somewhat agree, though. I think that, we can poo-poo AI.
Adopting it today?
I'm in the middle of that.
Not today. Yeah, but not right now today. But I think if you're looking into the future, which I think this is referencing from Mark Cuban, that you will be irrelevant if you're not.
Oh yeah, he's saying in the future because he's saying when the first trillionaire, which has not happened yet. So he's saying out, 4 or 5 years,
out in the future. Now, my question is like, do you need to employ data scientists yourself at some point, or is this going to be like a bartering service? Like I've got this problem. Hey, I'm going to give you some, access to my data, and you're going to apply your AI to it, and I use that to
It's going to be SaaS. It's 100% going to be Google, Amazon, and some SaaS providers because let's be real, building those metrics is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's not necessarily going to be Google and Amazon. There's going to be a specialized service.
You don't think they're going to buy them
that
up?
will arise.
No, because I think the Amazons and Googles are going to make their money from the Look, I've seen them. I've seen platforms that can take in all of our data from 673 plus episodes and categorize that, tag it, make it searchable.
Yeah, it's cool.
And they're transcoding all the audio and they're making it searchable.
I know that app.
And there's a few companies that are doing stuff like that right now. To your point, sorry, I'll get the floor back to you. To your point, that's a specific use case within AI that I think is going to be the thing.
That's what I was going to say. We're going to see market niche AI as a service emerge for different industries, and I think that if you're of the bent of leveraging neural networks, of leveraging random decision trees, of leveraging machine learning technology and software, that's where your business opportunity is going to be, right? It's going to be AI as a service, and there are going to be a lot of API services out there that actually deliver AI decision results based on some sort of corpus of data and some sort of particular AI classification criteria that are provided. We're going to see that.
We're already seeing that. Again, no politics, but like Cambridge Analytica and those guys in 2016 were doing exactly that. They have this giant corpus of data, and they're willing to let you get slices of it for a fee. And I think they'll be selling AI products to people. Kind of like you have employees and you say, well, here's a person who's a specialist in something, and you pay them a lot of money to come work for you because they're really good at what they do.
Well, I think you need to separate the data collectors and aggregators from the analytics.
Well, I'm talking about the analytics, though, but I mean selling
the selling of the results of the analytics.
Right? Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Paul, because I think one of the things that's going to arise really, really quickly is that anytime you have an artificial intelligence model, you have to train it with data. So where do you get the data from?
Right.
And
The data's a big deal.
You know, the training of those models and the sourcing of that data is going to be a really big market unto itself.
Yep.
You know, irregardless of the AI as a service side of it. So it's going to be interesting, and it's going to be kind of incestuous too, because you know, you don't want the output of an AI model to be necessarily the input of another training set, because then you might have some implicit biases that's not going to get you the appropriate result.
And that's how we get Skynet.
Which is what we're seeing. Well, this is what we're seeing with facial recognition right now. Is a lot of these places are utilizing facial recognition data sets that are coming from a university or a specific research grant that is finished and had like this huge large data set that is used for training and their you know, all their TensorFlows and stuff. Those get fed back into commercial products, and the commercial products are then using them to do their training for their AI analytics, and then they're outputting another set of data that is then being used and sold off. And there, it's just it is getting incestuous, and we have seen cases where that has led to some very interesting biases on facial recognition pieces. So I think it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting point. I think Tyler's right on it, because you know, the AI models that you build, whether they're, it comes down to this: either it's a neural network or it's a random decision tree these days. If it's a random decision tree or random decision forest, it's only as good as the input that you feed it, and the input comes down to a binary choice. Either you're going to give it you're going to give it the good choice, the good data, and you're going to give it the bad data, and then you're going to use the statistical modeling to make that decision logic in between. And you know, the question becomes, where does that data source from? And if the data sources from the output of another AI model, then just like Paul said, that's how we get Skynet. Because you know, bad data in is bad training is a bad child, and then you get bad decision logic out of that.
Or better yet, that's how you get Ultron.
Yeah.
I think it's a more accurate analogy.
That's how you get racist Ultron.
Yeah, that's how you get Ultron that goes, wait, the answer is I need to wipe out all of the human beings on Earth.
Yeah, it would make things so much
Ultron
better.
wanted to actually wipe out all people on Earth.
Yeah.
Thanos wanted to wipe out half the universe.
So look, people need to understand, take the mystery out of this. You know, artificial intelligence is really a classification-based system on statistical modeling. That's all it is ultimately. And yes, it will converge on the correct solution, but is still able to be poisoned by the training data sets. You have to model. You always have to model when you're dealing with artificial intelligence, and the output is only as good as the modeling and the training that occurs in.
But that's all humans are.
That is Ultron, right? It's AI that poisoned itself because of all the data that it was fed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
It is. But that's all humans are too.
That's true.
I mean,
well, that's right. That's right. Our brains are frankly
fancy neural net,
equally vulnerable to the same thing, right? You feed us a bunch of poison input, we're going to give you
poison output.
An incorrect decisive output. So
hence the current public knowledge.
Yep.
Right.
It's true.
And that's how you get Windows ME.
Training database.
But it goes back to sneakers. It's all about the information. What we see, what we hear, what we do is all defined by the information that we take in.
It is.
I like that. That is more relevant now.
They're going to succeed, though.
Still
the companies
relevant.
that are going to succeed in this space are the companies that source accurate data far and wide. The companies that actually are performing an incredible amount of mining right now.
Right, mining raw data that hasn't been biased in any way. The most amount of raw data.
And this comes back to the surveillance capitalist discussion, because those are the companies that are mining, without restraint. Right, they're mining with. There's no legislation to block them. They're just mining, ad hoc and at will. From everything that we provide them, and Google's a classic example. And they will succeed in an AI modeling space because they have the raw data, and that's really what it comes down to.
California, I wanted to get back to some of the legislation that was passed in this election cycle, Proposition 24. There was another proposition actually that I was tracking, and it doesn't relate to cybersecurity, but there was. I thought it was interesting that California passed legislation that basically said to companies like Uber and Lyft, and I think it even affected Amazon, in how they treated part-time or contractor-based
gig
employees.
economy workers, yeah.
Yeah, and they said, well, you need to give them benefits and bonuses and treat them like full-time employees. And the big companies in California were like, whoa, wait a minute. Can we meet somewhere in the middle? And I want to say it was Proposition 20 or 22 that they did pass. And Uber was a big proponent of to say, look, okay, we won't treat them as contractors like we previously did, but making us give them all the benefits that we would is too limiting to our own business model. So let's meet halfway. So they did pass that proposition, which I think is a good thing. I mean, we use services like Uber and Lyft. We want to see their employees treated fairly, and we want to use those services
and don't want them to cost $8,000 a ride. Yeah,
exactly. And so we don't want that cost passed to the consumer. So I think that was a good middle ground. I mean, in that definitely hits on some technology. California also passed Proposition 24, which sounded kind of like GDPR, like right to remove my data was a big thing. I didn't read in too much detail into Proposition 24. I do link to Bruce Schneier's mini article that links to a lot of different articles that reviews are very mixed on whether this proposition actually helps privacy or not.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you folks have had a chance to, in all the chaos this week, read California Proposition 24.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the upgrade to the CCPA that made it much more restrictive and much more difficult for people to get out of.
The right to request records of data that companies have collected about them, or ask the companies to delete that data or refrain from selling it. I think it's the refrain from selling it.
Right.
That's the issue.
Yeah.
Right. It's reminded me very much of GDPR.
I have kind of personally predicted this for a long time, because I have always held the position that there needs to be some sort of technological solution, be it some sort of commodity API or other form of technology solution that allows individuals to have control over the data that other businesses are actually processing. And I think a lot of the legislation is slowly coming around, frankly, to my point of view, where they're saying, yes, the individuals need control. They haven't got down to the technology side of it, and I'm hoping they kind of do, where they say, no, you must implement a specific API, and this is going to be standard version 1, and the user can have an application to withdraw the control of that data at any time.
No, I think there's selling data directly without any anonymization, and to me that's bad. Like we don't do that. That's bad. There's giving the user options, which could be anywhere in between. But there's also, it's okay to take my data as long as you're anonymizing it and not selling it directly, but maybe selling the results. And I think that's okay. I'm creeped out when the devices that are listening in your home listen to you talk, and then all of a sudden you're seeing ads for what you're talking about. To me, that crosses the creepy line, right? But if data's being collected and anonymized to go, hey, most people care about this in this way, and their challenge is with this issue this, and really what they want for a solution is this, so that the companies making solutions, let's translate that to cybersecurity, are like, hey, we need to have this kind of conversation with our customers and have this type of solution. Everyone kind of wins in that solution, in that scenario. But Joff, back to your point, I also want to give the user control over how their data is handled. To say, it's okay to anonymize my data and use it for this purpose, but it's not okay to use it in this way.
The individual needs a decision point where the company has to push a button, essentially, and the user has to say, or the individual whose data is affected has to say, yes, I permit you to sell that or do that, or no, I do not.
Right.
And it needs to be clear and easy enough that people can figure that out.
It needs to exist.
Yeah.
Go buy a car and go try and tell the DMV not to sell your information to a warranty company.
Good
No,
luck.
They do
Good
it
luck.
anyway.
But
They do it anyway.
It gets more insidious than that, though. I've been involved with some work we've been trying to qualifying laboratory systems for processing COVID test results. The amount of PII that is required to be handed over from the patient along with their test results to the state is huge.
Yep.
It's enough to cause some serious damage if it gets out. And it's legislatively required. The user can't opt out, which really sucks.
Mm-hmm. But
We're trying to figure out how to pass the CCPA requirements down to the providers of the systems. It's a bitch. They're not prepared for it.
And all that stuff's
really
interlinked. All that
interesting
healthcare stuff's interlinked. It's all connected. It's. I mean, the convenience side of it was pushing everybody to connect to all these different systems.
So they just got to push HIPAA by the wayside, or is that not HIPAA because?
Well, I mean, HIPAA was saying you need to protect that data, but they certainly weren't preventing them from, giving it away and collecting it. And a lot of those entities, then linked up later and said, oh, we're going to share with this provider and that provider, and we're going to share with all these insurance companies, and we're going to share with this and that. And now there's all these patient portals, so you can share all your records that way. I mean, there's so many ways into that data that it's just out there.
Well, Doug, one provider we talked to, they wanted to anonymize all the data because they were going to sell it to others to show what's going on, but they couldn't really explain satisfactorily how they were anonymizing it, and then there was no provision for somebody to opt out of being anonymized.
Well, yeah, I got asked that question too, and it wasn't on that level, but I got asked, if we anonymize this, can we sell it to like these researchers? And I was like, well, how are you going to anonymize it? And they were just like, oh, we'll take the Social Security numbers off of it, or we'll put stars over them. And I was like, well, are you sure that's going to anonymize that data? I mean, the names are on there. There's all kinds of there's addresses. And they were like, well, I know, but if we take everything off, the data's kind of useless. I'm like, okay. So
doesn't feel very anonymous in that case.
It didn't feel very anonymous to me. I was like, I'm not putting my data in that system. Of course, my data's all out there anyway. So it's like I just got notified that I had applied for unemployment apparently. So
apparently, in Michigan, Proposition 2 amends the state constitution to require law enforcement to obtain search warrants before seizing a person's electronic data or electronic communications.
Yep.
I would have thought that was already a thing, but
I thought
what
that
they
was
say
already covered by the Fourth Amendment.
I agree,
No.
but apparently the Stingray devices replicate cell towers and collect a whole bunch of people's information, which you didn't get a warrant to collect that information, perhaps. Is what I read between the lines in the article. But
they usually have a warrant, I think, for stingrays. So that's
usually
allowing
tied to a
them.
specific IMEI or a specific
Well, yeah, it's
you could filter by IMEI and be good, right? Or
well, that's what they do on like wiretaps and things. Is they may
if
hear
it's
other.
not a broad spread.
Yeah, but they can seize your electronics. I mean, that's
if they have a warrant, they can seize your electronics.
Or if you get arrested. I mean, if they pull you over in your car and you've got like a machine gun laying on the dashboard and and they arrest you, they can take all your electronics and theoretically they could open those and look at them. I mean, they've been doing that for years, so that's not illegal. Not if you've been arrested.
You don't need a warrant in that case because
you've been arrested.
You've been arrested, correct.
So.
Yeah,
there's some interesting gray area there too, and it's not explicitly covered in a lot of states because a lot of states have not caught up from a jurisdiction standpoint. And where this ends up failing really, really bad, I'm actually trying to help someone on this currently, is when you talk about civil matters. Things like a divorce where you have an e-discovery kind of a order from the judge for e-discovery for something like a custody hearing. Well, that e-discovery can be something as simple as you're required to give someone your password to your email account.
Yes.
Well, with single sign-on and SaaS applications now, if you're required to give someone your Gmail account or your email account that is tied to all these other applications, you now have a serious privacy concern. And the ability for e-discovery in its current state for most people or consumers' email, you can't just search for particular things. Those particular pieces within inside of e-discovery will give them access to confidential information, login, two-factor. And if you are doing this and you have an order to comply, what happens to your two-factor?
I've seen that evolve all over the place, and a lot of it depends on the attorneys, the courts, the case, the judge. And I mean, there was a time when they were writing court orders that said all electronic devices. So, that meant you could seize everything they had, which would, in your example, if it's a single sign-on, it would mean you could seize everything that theoretically belonged to them. And then that.
But can they convict you of a crime as part of that e-discovery? And isn't there an amendment that you won't incriminate yourself, or that doesn't apply because you're not incriminating yourself? Like, how does that's a legal question.
It's a search warrant thing. So if they get
there's
a search,
a scope.
Well, yeah, but I mean, that's what I was getting to. So if they write a search warrant on the studio and they say you can search G-Unit Studios, they can search everything in here. They can open cabinets, they can open your desk, they can open a safe, they can open anything you've got. And the safe is just like this password business because...
Well, if we were in California and there was drugs, apparently we wouldn't be able to be convicted now because they passed that legislation as well. That possession is no longer a crime.
But the forensics thing did evolve.
That passed too, by the way.
I know, and in Oregon too. You can have
Oregon too, yeah.
But that it did evolve in forensics where you did see courts writing court orders, because I did one once where the court order said you may only look at the C:\accounting/finance directory.
Interesting.
That was all you were supposed to look at. And I actually called the attorney because I said, what does this mean if I pull this drive up and I see a video of this guy, it's American Psycho. Right. What's my deal here? And he's
but also, if you see child pornography, now you're obligated by law, despite what the warrant said. No, that's
I guess it depends on. And that's a really complicated issue because that's what the attorney said. He said this is a really complicated issue because the plain sight says if a police officer walks in this room and we've got a Scarface-esque pile of cocaine on the table, and we're not in Oregon
or California,
but we've got our Scarface-sized pile of cocaine on the table.
And it's not broken up into individual bags.
Yeah, that is plain sight. The police officer sees it. They don't need a warrant to say they saw it.
Right.
But on the other hand, if our Scarface-sized pile of cocaine is in a locked safe,
sorry, I just can't hold it
I feel like Doug has experience. Like it's so vivid.
It's what I wanted to be when I grew up. Say hello to my little friend.
Something about the money and then the power. And
and it was the whole blackface thing. Just really, we won't get into that. But that stuff did evolve, and the attorney didn't have a good answer on that. He said it's going to depend on where you saw it. He said you should not be looking outside of that directory. So now it gets into how plain sight is it? And I said, what if there's a folder on the drive that says my child pornography?
Yeah.
And he said, don't look in it.
That
was the scope. And he was like, we're not interested in that. We're interested in this financial case, and you have a court order to look in the financial folder. Don't look at anything else. And it didn't come up because we couldn't really see anything else. And
it's conversations like this that spawn we need to bring an actual attorney on the show to have a segment.
Think so.
And a lot of it that happens not frequently, but frequently enough where we need to have a segment every once in a while.
I think so. Yeah, it would be great to have.
I think we should have a lawyer panel of sorts. That was really funny.
Yeah, but no, like every once in a while we should.
But we should have. We should have like a lawyer panel, but getting some lawyers that would be comfortable with that kind of thing would be probably a challenge.
Comfortable with the what if scenarios that we propose.
Right.
Valid. I mean, they're valid. They're valid questions, and there is a lot of in this election cycle, a lot of new legislation and changing legislation that I think begs the question. I think it's a great time.
And a lot of times, especially in what we do, it's not clear.
Yeah.
Because there's no case law.
And that's never a good thing.
No, it's dangerous because one judge may interpret it completely different than another judge, and that legal process is about...
But it's how we end up with cases such as Kevin Mitnick and
somebody appeals it.
What was the person who committed suicide? What was his... Oh, my God. What was his name? Good Lord, there's people screaming it at me right now.
Well, I'm sure.
Well, there was the guy that Epstein. No, not Epstein. No, the younger the Silk, was it the Silk, not the Silk Road guy? Was it the Silk Road guy? It was the Silk Road guy. Albrecht?
Was it Albrecht?
Albrecht?
Is that who you're talking about?
Right. But then there's the other person that went to prison for the accessing the thing on Apple with the IDs and stuff. Well, who was that guy? That was another guy.
I'm old, man.
There's the cases about that,
but
where it was unclear.
Well, and those cases evolve over time, and so what happens, I mean, in the legal system is over time there become precedents in case law, and that's essentially what lawyers are supposed to be doing, is looking at all that and saying there was a case in some district court where they did keep this evidence, and then here's one where they threw it out, and now it goes to an appeals court, and it keeps going, and sometimes that stuff goes to the Supreme Court, and they try to interpret it.
Hey, though, I've got to ask though, if we did a show like that,
Weave. Sorry, it was Weave. November 2012. Identity fraud was one of them. Yes.
Andrew
but
Ehrenheimer.
I would also be interested.
What was it? Sorry, Tyler. I want to.
Andrew Ehrenheimer. That was actually Corey. So.
Andrew and Ehrenheimer. Did I say that right?
I don't know.
Yes.
Good, close enough for government work.
No, it's actually a really. There's a documentary film about it and stuff. And Andrew Ehrenheimer is Weave, and then there was the. People are going to get really mad at me because I can't remember all the names. And then there was another case. Where the person was tried and convicted. It was really sad because he committed suicide. I forget that. I should know that person's name.
If we had a diverse panel, though, I really got to throw this in here. I would be interested in what the folks that are interested in our field legally, what that perception is of the pen testing industry in general, in terms of its value to society, its value to what they're doing. It's there's a lot of questions that we could actually put on the table with a panel kind of session like that, because and frankly, there's a lot of importance there to us as an industry, because as time goes on, we're already seeing more and more and more that there is interest in examining what we do from a legal perspective and even legislative perspective, and so having that kind of session, I think it would be very instructive to have probably a set of lawyers that were both familiar and not so familiar with the industry, just to see what kind of diversity of opinion would come forward.
Well, we've had more.
Ross Albright was the Silk Road creator. Who went to prison, and there was someone else too. Sorry, I want to make sure we get this.
We've had more and more people in our Joint Masters JD program that are people that are getting their law degrees to become attorneys, who are also going to get MA in cyber because they want to add knowledge of this field.
Aaron Schwartz, sorry.
Okay.
It was Aaron Schwartz was the other case that I was thinking of. Sorry, I want to make sure we. But because Aaron's case was really tragic. There's a great documentary film about it, so I didn't want that to hang around out there.
Okay.
Anyway,
it's really good that Paul has backup restore capability.
Yeah, really my brain. I had used the Googles extensively to make sure we got all those. Yeah,
but there are more attorneys that are wanting to add understanding of this field. I mean, not to be practitioners, but understanding of this field, so that as they do cases and they try to give their clients reasonable advice, that they have some kind of background in it, because it's just a little overwhelming.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I have friends that are attorneys that have actually come to me asking for side advice from time to time. So there's definite interest there, both formally and informally, and I think it would be a fascinating panel to have. But we would have to structure it very, very carefully and have to give a lot of information in advance because we're lawyers.
The Aaron Schwartz case I think was really interesting because. In 2011, he was arrested in connection with alleged computer crimes that he was accessing data, but it was like data that he did similar to that other case we talked about where the police officer was accessing data outside of the scope of their work.
Right.
Somewhat related. But the Aaron Schwartz case was also very tragic because he ended up committing suicide in the end. And my assessment was he didn't do anything terribly horrible in that, but it goes back to your point of it was unclear.
Yeah.
And that's a case of where it's unclear, gone horribly wrong. I mean, Aaron was an entrepreneur. He was one of the developers of the RSS feed and Markdown languages and things like that. So,
but it's unclear.
Yeah, I mean, and that's unclear. Then that was my example of unclear being really bad in that case.
I mean, and you've been seeing that ever since Mitnick. I mean,
yes.
Because they didn't necessarily, the law doesn't necessarily catch up with this industry as fast as this industry changes. And by the time they get down to the minutia and they start talking about what somebody did, it's moved on. And now the law says, well, yeah, that was illegal, but this isn't. And I mean, and it gets really
Go back to our interview with Leonard Rose, right?
Yeah.
That was another case in 1991, 1-year jail sentence. But when you talk to Leonard, you're like, yeah, no. Like, you get his side of the story, and you're like,
yeah,
really? Like, Leonard's a great, great person. One of my favorite interviews of all time. Where are we going next?
I was going to say, do we have another story?
Well, yeah, we got lots of other stories. Buckle up.
How about we talk about the Apple exploits in the wild for fun?
Yes, let's do it.
Cool. Even I put in stuff this week too, by the way.
Awesome. Oh my goodness.
All right, let's do iOS, then we'll get to one of Joff's stories.
Yeah, so we've got, 3 separate security flaws in iOS that were being actively exploited. Today was pretty much a Patch Tuesday, except it's, Thursday.
Good Lord, it sounds like Android. What's going on here?
On iOS.
And,
yeah,
well, they
and
didn't
it's
just
not
patch
just, it's not
iOS.
Yeah, you're talking highly
Tyler.
privileged system rights, and you got kernel and memory exploits happening. I think one of them was a font. Yeah, there was something weird with a font, and it is basically Armageddon for iOS tonight.
It's interesting. We talked about a font vulnerability a couple weeks ago, maybe, and we've talked about them in the past. And it's really, I think it comes down to data parsing because you're rendering fonts, and so you're rendering unstructured data.
And fonts are trusted by system almost always on almost all operating systems. So there's
that's where the vulnerability comes in.
How dangerous could a font be? Come on.
Right, but that's what you would think, like, because fonts are kind of this like annoying
except Comic
thing.
Sans.
Comic Sans is just a funny.
It was always dangerous.
It was always dangerous to use Comic Sans, and hilarious in the same way. But fonts are kind of this, we think, live in user land and are just a formatting thing. But under the covers, a lot of vulnerabilities. It would be a really fascinating presentation to talk about the history of vulnerabilities in fonts, I think.
Lots of man, talk about a great conference talk.
Be a whole day.
Right?
Right?
And like, what font would you use for the presentation? Like, there'd be so many angles there.
I've got it. Wingdings.
Wingdings.
God.
There we go.
But now you've got me wanting to embark on a research project to look at who's presented on font vulnerabilities in the past, because I'm sure
they have. Yeah, come on. I mean,
maybe not. Has there been an entire presentation on font vulnerabilities, and what other presentations have referenced font vulnerabilities to accomplish?
Where's our intern? Get our interns in here.
Let's do it.
Hey, Paul, I got the title for your presentation already. It's Wu-Tang meets fonts.
Wu-Tang meets Wingdings.
There it is.
We don't give a font.
There you go.
I learned everything I know about hacking fonts from watching spaghetti westerns. No way.
Right.
It's beautiful. I mean, there is no end of comic mileage that we can get out of this.
I mean, it's like a pun fest just with font names. And
it's beautiful.
Well, what's interesting about this set of updates is that they were severe enough that they produced another version of iOS 12 for the iPhone 5, 6, and 6 Plus. In other words, unsupported devices, they produced an update for the OS.
Wow.
So, and
that's unheard of.
Parser, kernel, and FaceTime vulnerabilities.
Back to our previous conversation, Lee, Apple and Google want you to buy new phones. Samsung too. They want you to keep buying new phones.
Less so than Google.
No, I don't know. There was the whole battery conspiracy.
Well,
conspiracy.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, all right. Proven conspiracy. There's my conspiracy theory that Google has left the bug in Android 11 that breaks facial recognition, so you go out and be a sucker like myself and buy the new Pixel 5, which is totally my assessment, right?
I always think it's funny when Google Zero, like their researchers there are industry top class. They're probably some of the best vulnerability researchers I know.
right? Tamas.
Yeah.
Oh, just yeah. I can't say enough good about them. But it's always funny when they release something because they'll release their own stuff out there.
Oh yeah.
They don't really care who it is, but it's funny when they release Apple stuff because it is like drop the mic, like, no big deal. There's like $1 million in bug bounty here. We're just gonna just drop these today.
But Google very publicly says we have Project Zero. We employed researchers such as Tavis Ormandy to do this vulnerability research, and guess what? We're disclosing vulnerabilities in our own products and other people's products. And I have to say, if you look at the history, disclosing very responsibly. And not afraid to go, you know what, push comes to shove. In fact, I think I had a story in here where Google was like, to GitHub, like, you know what? No, we're going to release this.
Yep.
Does Apple have the same thing? I feel like Apple doesn't have the same thing.
I think not.
And if they do, they're locked somewhere in a basement in Cupertino, and right. No one is allowed to talk about it.
They have teeth that break off and kill you.
So it's like, exactly, right?
Is this like the 5 guys who review all the apps to see if they can be in the iOS App Store?
No, I mean that could be a thing.
Are there 5 now?
I like your five guys like burger analogy to that. But
you gotta feed them.
Apple does not treat security the same way as many other companies. Even if you look at the major companies that are in Apple's realm, we look at Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook. Apple's the weird oddball out of that bunch that just treats security very, very differently, still shrouded in security, in secrecy, rather.
That's the whole
but
thing.
Paul, you've got to remember that they're actually producing gold nuggets. And when you produce gold nuggets, there is no flaw in the gold nugget. It is an aesthetic piece of beautiful perfectness.
It's a nugget of
true.
Gold.
It is true, Joff. It speaks to their culture, their go-to-market strategy, and their philosophy about the market. And in their security strategy, in some ways, you have to give them props that it does all align with their corporate mission, culture, and go-to-market strategy.
That's right. That's right. I mean, it's really all about the fact. Remember, you have to go back to the history, and they've stayed true to it. Steve Jobs was fascinated with some really interesting cultural traits around the world, and it all came down to aesthetic, beautiful, and simplicity. That was his thing, and that culture is endemic to the company. It's that simplicity and aesthetic beautifulness of engineering, and I think that it makes it seem a lot like security is shrouded by secrecy. Perception is reality, frankly. I mean, that's what comes across to all of us. Right?
It's interesting. My kids ask me all the time because they love the Apple ecosystem. And they're like, Dad, why don't you use any Apple products? Because I moved off the Apple ecosystem entirely years ago. And really my answer is kind of centered around, I like freedom. And I think that's really telling to Apple's strategy. I don't want to be locked into the proprietariness of their hardware and software and restrictions. I don't want my security to be shrouded in secrecy. I like it to be open, which is why I went to Android, which is why I went to Linux. And I'm not saying that's more secure by any stretch of the imagination.
I mean, I'm the same way with my like computer hardware. I don't care about my phone because I'm actually with Tyler's the phone we were talking about earlier. I would be fine with the phone with one app on it.
It's a commodity. It's a device.
It's just a tool that I carry. It's like a watch. I don't really care if Seiko built a watch I can't open the back of and take it apart.
Yeah, but at the same time, Doug, I'll disagree with you there. I like to be able to change my default messaging app, my default phone app on my phone. I like that,
and that's
freedom
fine.
and flexibility.
I mean, that's why they make chocolate and vanilla. I don't really care about that. But on like my computing hardware, I am the complete other way around. I want to be able to open the box and I want to try to put a Turtle Beach sound card in there and see if I can get it to work. So I don't have an Apple computer because I have the same exact problem. I don't want to go down that road with my computing device. But my phone, I don't really care. It's like my car. I'm not going to mess with it.
I like my computing device to be... It's why I like System 76 to give them a plug on the show, because a lot of their firmware for controlling their hardware is open source. There's a GitHub repository. If you're so inclined, you can go look at the firmware that controls
and I like that a lot.
The bus architecture,
that.
for the lights on the hard drive, for the different buses.
I love that on my computing hardware. I
Yeah.
mean, I truly do. I want to be able to control it. And so I completely get it. I mean, I'm not even arguing about the phones. It depends on the use you want to put your phone to.
I agree.
And if I wanted to use my phone like a computing device more, I would probably get rid of my iPhone and switch to an Android. As it is, my phone works just dandy. And I'm fine with Apple being in control of it, so I don't have a problem because it's just a tool to me. But my computer's another whole matter. I don't even like using these laptops; they're just convenient because I can't work on it.
I know.
I mean, I don't like the idea. It's too small to work on. It's so proprietary. I can't just take But for my desktop machine and everything, it's all home rolled, and I built it all myself, and I put all the pieces in it, and I would never ever buy a.
It's interesting. It's why we have the conversations. And security is a part of that conversation where some of the systems we use for production are Apple proprietary devices. And we've got the Apple, I don't remember what the system was, that looks like a cylinder. It was the Apple Pro model that looks like a cylinder.
Called?
Mac Pro.
Yeah.
And to your point, you can't do much with how you get in there and to work on it and to do stuff. You can't. And then I want to update the operating system on it, but it processes all the audio for all the shows, and I'm like, do I want to mess with the? And you know what? I just want to buy something new, and I want to build a PC myself, and I want to put Windows on it, which is mind-blowing for me that here we are 20 years later talking about Microsoft being the more free and open platform. However, it is, because I can go get commodity hardware.
Yeah.
In fact, I can go build an AMD system that if you look at the latest benchmarks, their processor benchmarks are right up there with Intel for a fraction of the cost, and build a completely, totally open system that I can swap out parts on, run Windows on it, and be happy and not really be tied to any hardware or software in such a stringent way as Apple does.
But I will give you, I'm going to give you an analogy from the audio world, though, that you'll get about the phones and all this. You can go buy a stereo. You can go buy like a whatever stereo.
You go to Circuit City and go buy away.
Or you could build a stereo out of all the parts and components and tubes and replace the tubes with a better tube and all these things.
Requires a lot of soldering, and there are kits out there for
and
that.
Sometimes you end up with a really awful stereo.
Yeah.
That you build yourself.
True. Oh, and if that isn't the analogy to Linux versus Windows versus Mac, I don't know what
because
is.
I've been there. I mean, I went and I spent all this money, and I had this incredible rig, and I put new tubes in it and all this fancy stuff. And my friend went and paid $149 at this electronics store for this Techniques, all-in-one unit, and it sounded so much better than the one I built.
It is true. There are, I mean, for the audiophiles out there are headphone amp kits that you can get.
But it's all what you want to use it for. I mean, it's all what you need.
And that's a fun project and all. Yeah. Or you can go to a really reputable company.
Sure.
Here in the U.S., Germany, the UK, it seems Shit is a company.
Yeah.
Actually, SCHIIT.
They make really good
stuff. Great company. Audize out of California makes fantastic gear. Project out of the UK. I mean, they make just phenomenal gear. I don't have to put anything together or solder or anything, and I tell you what, the audiophile in me is extremely happy.
I mean, that's the same thing. I mean, it's just it's all what you need it for and what you want to do with it. So both markets are served, and I get it in both directions. But
I think this entire discussion is a perfect segue to my story.
Here it comes.
And
lay it on.
So I have a story about Intel malware defenses directly being built on chip, which I think is a great, interesting story. So if you're okay with that, Paul.
Please do. I'm all ears.
So it's the Tiger Lake architecture. It's going to be the first CPU, to offer a security capability known as control flow enforcement. And the interesting thing about this chip is that they've worked with Microsoft, Intel working with Microsoft, to basically attempt to thwart the ROP chain mechanism that malware authors have been using, which is return-oriented programming. And for the short tutorial on that, return-oriented programming involves malware authors actually finding a sequence of assembly instructions in memory for existing libraries that might be loaded or code that might be loaded to actually use those as kind of mini trampolines. Those sequences actually do what the malware author wants them to do, so they use them to sort of jump in and do some things without having to actually inject stuff into memory, which is fantastic. The interesting thing about the Tiger Lake architecture and the malware defenses that they're interested in introducing here is that the chip ends up having its own version of a stack actually on board. A control stack is what they're calling it. And I don't know the full details here, but nearest I can tell is it looks like they're going to actually track the proper return addresses that are in the address space of the program that's running. And if they don't match at runtime what the program's trying to do, they're just going to fail. They're going to throw some sort of exception.
Could that affect legitimate? Could that affect legitimate? I mean, I guess it could affect legitimate applications, but what's the likelihood it's going to affect legitimate applications? Probably pretty slim, right?
I think it's pretty slim. I think it's a very low likelihood that it's going to affect legitimate applications, because legitimate applications do not normally overwrite a return stack pointer to a new address.
To go, I want to execute code like over here, not where I would normally execute code, and that's totally a predictable thing.
Yeah. So
is that stack pointer? Is it like a signature, so the stack pointer is getting assigned like at execution time, or is it like something that's calculated, or how are they determining that the stack pointer is what it's supposed? It must be a signature or something.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question, and I couldn't quite work out from the article, Doug. I think likely what's happening is they're analyzing the executable statically and actually building that control stack
on the fly. Loading this program. You're going on the stack. I know you do these things, and here's your space on the stack to do that. You can't jump out of that and use the trampolines like the job.
But Alex Ionescu, which is somebody that we know who works at CrowdStrike, likes to say that it's a benign program likes to say that if a benign programming is a building made of Lego bricks that were built in a specific sequence, ROP uses the same Lego pieces but in a different order. This technology actually enforces the correct
order.
Is what he's basically saying. He's saying that it's going to be a very effective technique for mitigation against ROP chains. So it's a really interesting article. I found it very, very cool. I'm trying to remember whether I've met Alex. I probably have at some point. But it was a very, very cool article from Ars Technica. So look for interesting developments there. And obviously, being security community, we're going to look at interesting ways to actually poison that control flow. So we'll see what kind of evolves as that technology.
And they have had problems with this thing in the past. They're not the same thing, but didn't Intel do some other kind of processor years ago that had some kind of real problem with it in terms of that? The security actually made it worse. I mean, I don't remember all the details, but I swear there was something they were doing like that with like security on a chip kind of stuff.
Well, I think what you're getting at is anticipating branches and jumps that the microprocessing code was doing, and potentially caching that ahead of time and things.
Yeah.
Actually, it's actually
in Meltdown.
It's in the story, was what I was thinking.
Yeah.
It's about they were trying to set aside protected memory so that it was almost like building a shell in the mainframe, and you were isolating software in these little like memory blocks, and I guess it was real easy to jump out of there and break that.
Speculative
execution, right?
Speculative execution. There you go. That's the words. Tyler nailed it.
Yep.
But I think it's interesting. I think it's great that Microsoft's been working on that, and apparently Windows 10 version 2004 that was just released actually provides the support to work with Tiger Lake and work with this control this control protocol and control stack that's in the CPU. So,
but you're making the case, Joff, AMD versus Intel as opposed to your processor going with Intel to take advantage of some of these more advanced security features.
Yeah, I suppose I am making that case. First of all, it's a pretty. You've got to remember that we've come a long way from the original Stack Overflow stuff to the point. I mean, because if you remember as a security professional, standard Stack Overflow means that we could just write a sequence of assembly instructions, onto the stack and get them to execute. And we could even write them into memory that was not supposed to actually be marked as executable,
and even have a no-op sled so that we didn't have to be as accurate.
Oh, the good old days.
Exactly. And so there was mechanisms introduced to actually prevent us from executing code in memory segments that were not supposed to be executable. And then that's why the whole idea of RUP chains came forward, because RUP chains was actually to evade that issue of trying to execute code in segments that were not executable, and use parts of the of different DLLs and stuff that were loaded to be able to chain together executable segments of assembly to do the task. So this development is a pushback against the RUP chain stuff. And I guess so the race goes on, right?
It's so sexy and nerdy. I'm like mildly turned on right now, Josh. I'm not gonna lie. It's really
after that too. Yeah. I'm really that kind of stuff just gets me really excited. So it's gonna be interesting to see where that goes. I think traditionally Windows and Microsoft have had the challenge where people have disabled enforcement of those features because of legacy software, and it's going to be interesting to see if that actually turns into an issue with this one as well. I suspect not, based on what I'm reading. But
this is still based on the stack. Does that help us when it comes to JavaScript overflow vulnerabilities in the browser, which are largely heap overflow? That wouldn't help.
It wouldn't help with that.
No.
It's probably not going to help with the heap-based overflow. You've still got to gain instruction pointer control somehow, though, right? And if that instruction pointer cannot be overwritten because of a comparison to a static stack that lives in the processor somewhere, it potentially
would help with that.
Yeah, it depends on the nature of it. It might help with the initiation of that attack, right? The rest of the code could still live in the heap, but if you can't get to it...
Yeah, I gotcha.
Yeah.
There was a Windows 10 zero-day flaw that 3 days ago this was posted. It's yet to be patched. I haven't read all of the details.
Oh, this is the Google one, right?
This was the one that the Google Project Zero found. And they gave it was it a 7 or a 10-day window? And Microsoft's not releasing
this one's. I actually read about this one. This one's in the cryptographic driver.
Yes,
CNG.
correct.
It is.
Yes, CVE 2020-17087. It requires another vulnerability, CVE 2020-15999.
Right. The actual issue with this one, I actually literally read the source code of the proof of concept today.
Yay.
It's funny that you mention it. I was doing my homework. Oh my god. Anyway, to exploit it requires actually an integer overflow. There's a short integer that is overflowed. So if the value of that 16 bits is exceeded, then you can overflow it. The immediate impact, if you're not able to overflow it in an intelligent way, is just to cause a denial of service in the kernel, because it is a kernel-based driver. However, if you're able to overflow it and actually get some sort of assembly instructions into that memory buffer space, then there is some potential for some execution, I believe.
Yeah, CVE 2020-15999. Thanks to Polarity, I recognize that as one of the Chrome vulnerabilities.
Yeah, and that's Ring 0 stuff too, because it's driver level.
The other one's cng.sys, right? Is that the one?
That's the crypto library.
That's the one I was talking
that's the crypto library that gets compromised. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's a C-based, straight up C code, which is where most kernel code is, and it honestly is a short integer. Where they didn't control the upper bound of the value.
65,536.
And it's interesting. I read an article. I didn't put it in the show notes about the most popular programming languages, mostly because it's not interesting. However, relevant to this conversation, because the article I read said that C and C++ was still the predominant language with I think Python surpassing Java
Probably.
in terms of number.
Java's
of lines
never
of code.
popular.
Well, it has been popular.
I know what you mean.
Yeah,
I know what you
but-
mean.
Right.
But most
But wait,
used.
Well,
most
what's
used.
the logo that Oracle puts up? Like a bazillion devices run this thing, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's because you have no choice. But
Yeah,
Billions and billions of devices.
billions and billions.
But it's
of
just, I mean, C and C++ have been around so long, and they're so used in all this system-level
Well,
development.
drivers and Linux
I mean,
kernel
everything
and
is
Windows
written
kernel,
in C,
everything's written in C++.
I see why Python's become the more popular, because if you're developing at a system level, you write in C. If you're developing tools, you write it in Python, because why would you want to write it in Java? But I know it runs on a million devices.
Also, did you see Google Project Zero was in the news again? There was a GitHub Actions feature and GitHub vulnerability. Did anyone look into this? This was kind of a weird thing. I didn't.
I did not.
I didn't.
They gave him a 90-day deadline, and
Well, they'd already given them 104 days, and GitHub hadn't fixed it, and so they just said, okay, that's it. So it was the same with that other one, that Project Zero came out, because they normally give Microsoft a lot longer. They give them 90 days, but this time they didn't, because they said it was already being actively exploited, and that's why they released it so quick.
As the runner process parses every line printed to standard out, looking for workflow commands, every GitHub action that prints untrusted content as part of its execution is vulnerable. It's able to set arbitrary environment variables, results in remote code execution as soon as another workflow is executed. That was interesting. Again, I didn't dig into it deep. Russian authorities did make a rare arrest of a malware author. 20-year-old.
They wanted something from him.
Yeah.
I love Tyler's take on these nation-state hacking stories, because you just cut
just
right
give
to
me
the
your
chase.
code.
You're like, I don't have any inside information, but they must have wanted something from him.
They wanted that. They wanted that password.
We down to his number 4.
It doesn't hide at number 4 at all.
I think it was Mike Kershaw, the author of Kismet. He may have talked about it on the show when we interviewed him many moons ago. Talked about, password security as only as good as like the battery that's hooked up to your nipples kind of thing, and you will give up your password. That somehow reminds me of this story, Tyler, when you're like, the Russian government might have wanted something from this person and therefore arrested them.
Do you want to die from a crossbow in a sauna with your partner? Like, that's the question. You can get chucked out of a window or die by a crossbow.
It's not; those are neither are really good options, Tyler.
Yeah, I'm not with that.
In either case, to avoid either scenario, you're giving up your password to your PGP key, and that's it, right? Like, there's no.
If they can hear you while you're screaming and descending, right?
Sausage price is going to go up soon.
Apparently, this person was linked to several malware strains.
I'm sorry, or it was the name of a Trojan that he wrote.
Right.
Crypto miner.
Yes, it is a nickname of I'm sorry.
Yeah.
See, it encrypted someone's porn in the ministry of somewhere, and they're pissed off about it now, and someone's got to pay the piper.
Yep. Get out the truck batteries. We're all ready to go here.
Why is it that the internet always comes back to porn?
I would say that the article that fired me up the most and made me pissed off was this article about cocktails, because we hold cocktails very near and dear to our hearts here at Security
where's Jack
Weekly.
when you need him?
Back to basics, making cocktails normal again.
Oh, I saw you posting about that.
I agree with some of the things they said in here, but largely,
Fernet should die. Yes, everyone agrees Fernet should die, and we can get back to cocktails without Fernet. But other than that, I'm not.
Right? They said a lot of really provocative things, including how to make an old fashioned, which I completely disagree with. I'm old school.
It's just their old fashioned is wrong.
It's wrong.
Their old fashioned is wrong.
But also, they've got a Manhattan that he says you should shake and not stir, and that to me is a fucking atrocity.
That's an atrocity.
That's
absolutely
so we're all on
wrong.
the same page.
Straight
there.
up wrong.
However,
I
when
can think of only one reason to do it that way, Paul, this week, and that was to honor Sean Connery. But other than that,
agreed. Well, we'll get to the martinis in a minute, and he talks about martinis, and he says, so vodka is better than the pine tree solution that is gin. And I will agree, there are a lot of gins that I would label as pine tree solution. So I'm feeling you there. And then he says, gin is by far the worst of major liquors. Bourbon, then scotch, then whiskey, non-Irish, then Irish whiskey, then vodka, then rum, then tequila, then gin.
Oh, come on.
What? I mean, I'm almost there with the author on this order. I think there are some really good gins out there. In ranking them last, I kind of, okay, put that aside for a second. I would swap scotch and bourbon. So I would go scotch and then bourbon and then maybe Irish whiskey and then whiskey. I would change the order a little bit. And then I agree, vodka, rum, tequila.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's a pretty broad set of attacks right there. On
it is a broad, right? I mean, because if this was a cybersecurity article, man, like I would love to see you flip this into a cybersecurity article and invoke as much rage as this article to be right in some areas, but just challenge social norms. If this was a hacker that wrote this article, they are challenging social norms. You can't put tequila
and gin down at the bottom and say, oh, all tequila is the same. It all sucks. Because there's tequila that's basically horse piss, and there's tequila that's like, wow, that's impressive.
Now, hold on. I will link back to our Stokey Geek special on tequila, where arguably I couldn't walk, somehow made it home to my couch and didn't leave for a while. Like we're talking like the next day, kind of like your story earlier. That was my tequila. But the tequila was, oh my God, it was so delicious.
And I can say the same thing about bourbon. I mean, you get in there and buy that bottom shelf bottle with a yellow label that says bourbon on it.
And we call that Four Roses, but
their company logo is "Get Drunk." I mean, compared to something really good. I mean, so I think this guy is just taking massive liberties, and I don't agree with a lot of them.
I do, but then he's the author, and I believe it's a he that says stuff like, there's one thing that the classic gin martini offers that vodka or martini could not, or at least should not, and that's blue cheese stuffed olives. I will agree. That makes for a fabulous martini. And so they say, and I love his recipe, 12 to 15 parts gin, 1 part vermouth, and blue cheese stuffed olives. I have to say, you'd throw those blue cheese stuffed olives in there. I can't.
I mean, that's a perfect martini, except you don't leave the gin in it, or the vermouth in it. You just pour the vermouth in the glass and you swirl it around and pour the vermouth down the drain. That's how you make a perfect martini.
That's where he's going with some of his other drinks on there, like the Sazerac with the absinthe.
That's a classic, Sazerac is a classic old drink.
Sonny Bunch is the author, and I tell you what, I disagree with a lot of things in this article.
But it's
I would love to see a cybersecurity article that invokes as much emotion as this one does. I think we saw one other article this year, which is my top article, which I can't remember. We covered it several weeks ago on Paul Security Weekly and on Business Security Weekly in a short time frame. That was the best article that was posted this year. And even if other articles come out, you'd be hard pressed to find a better article about cybersecurity. We debated it for probably half an hour on a Paul Security Weekly episode. And this article about cocktails was in that realm of just invoking so much emotional response and challenging social norms.
I just have to say, where's Jack when we need him? Because, Jack
love to get Jack's opinion on this, Joff, right?
He would definitely have opinions.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yep.
He would have already gone...
Yeah, that would have been the beginning, and then we would have been in for like a 20-minute speech.
Because he'd start with, never shake your fucking Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
I mean, he would just be... Yeah.
And the traditional way to make an old-fashioned is the way. And I know there's newfangled ways, but I'm a purist.
Put asparagus foam in your old-fashioned.
Right? Yeah, that's kind of what it was.
So look, Jack,
it would have been a fun rant.
If you're listening right now, Jack, get on Skype and call us up.
Jack, wherever you are.
We're calling to you, man.
We would have loved your rant on this. It would have been so much fun.
So first, in the old-fashioned, he calls for double rye whiskey, which I prefer straight bourbon in the... Anyway.
All right. It's 9:40.
Oh, wait, that was just... Yeah. Anyway.
So...
If you've heard us talk about cocktails and you're into cocktails, it's a great article to get some different opinions in there. With that, Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Paul Security Weekly. Doug, take us out.
Well, it's been real. See you next time.